So let us start then. I think people are joining in, but let us start. Otherwise, we'll be short of time. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining in for this another panel discussion hosted by Mike Legal. To introduce myself, I am Tushar Bhargav, the co-founder of Mike Legal. To all of those who are not aware about Mike Legal, we are a legal tech company building AI-powered tools that are trusted by more than 250 law firms and organizations world over. Every month, we organize a session with the industry experts to learn from them and hear insights about the tricks and trades of the businesses. So we have earlier covered sessions where we discussed about copyright ownership on content generated by AI and how legal tech solutions are helping organizations streamline their day-to-day tasks. Today, we will be discussing how to navigate legal challenges faced by startups from being a startup to a unicorn. I think there could have been no better time to host this webinar, as recently GST Council had decided to include online gaming industry into the ambit of 28% GST. And there is a lot of conversations happening around how detrimental this could be for the gaming industry at large. I think this webinar will provide us with an insight as to how GCs work to ensure all compliances are done, these kind of challenges, they are able to tackle it, and legally everything is kept under control in any organization. In this webinar, we will be learning from the experiences of 3 highly experienced general counsels who have successfully guided or are guiding their startups through the legal hurdles and opportunities of scaling up to become unicorns. We will hear about the legal issues that startup faces, such as managing resources, intellectual property, compliances, contracts, and litigation. We will get tips on how to build and manage a legal team, collaborate with other functions, and communicate with stakeholders. Whether you are a founder, an investor, a lawyer, or anyone interested in the legal aspects of startups, this webinar should provide you with valuable insights and practical advice. We would also be taking questions from our audience as well towards the end. So in case you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat and we will pick it towards the end. So without further ado, join me in welcoming our speakers for today's webinar. First, we have Gaurav Dugar from CredAble. He is the Executive Vice President, Corporate Development and General Counsel at CredAble. He comes with over a decade's experience as a transactional lawyer. At CredAble, he is responsible for the legal function and corporate governance across the tech enterprise verticals and the lending business. Thank you, Gaurav, for being part of this webinar.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I think one of us has run into some technical difficulties. Tushar will be joining back in a moment, please.
Yeah, apologies, there was some connectivity issue at my end. So yeah. So yes. So next we have Ashish Chandra from CoinSwitch. He is general counsel at CoinSwitch. He has over 22 years of experience with various large and startup internet and emerging technology companies such as CoinSwitch, WhatsApp, Netflix, eBay, Reliance Jio, and Snapdeal. Thank you, Ashish, for joining us this afternoon for this webinar. All right. So next we have Arjun David Alexander from Open Financial Technologies. He heads legal and compliance at Open Financial Technologies. He has experience of over 10 years in banking and finance law. Thank you, Arjun, for taking time out from your busy schedule and agreeing to be part of this.
Pleasure to be here, Tushar. Thank you.
Yeah. So without wasting any time, I would directly dive into the most important question, that is there in everyone's mind these days. How do GCs deal with regulatory uncertainty and changes in different markets and jurisdictions? I would request Ashish to go first, as he himself has gone through something similar when regulations had changed overnight for the crypto industry.
Yeah, so I would say that I was not part of crypto industry when it changed overnight, but there are plenty of things which change overnight, and I think this is part of the startup kind of DNA. So if you have decided to start working with, I won't say startup, is more like, I think more like an emotional statement, but whenever you work with an emerging technology kind of company which is testing the waters of new technologies where laws don't exist, or where government has not started to think about it, I think this is something which you have to assume that, right? uh, so I think it's more than the legal skill. Personally, I think this is more about how you have to mold your personality, how you have to mold your thought process to navigate all these challenges. How do you have to build your ecosystem? So it's like totally different. I mean, I have had experience working with large company, let's say Reliance, right? But I was not working in their oil and gas or maybe retail. I was there, I'm a first lawyer for Geo when they were still on the drawing board as such, right? So it was, I mean, kind of a startup, like they are entering into a 4G ecosystem way back, I think in 2011, 2012, right? So while it was Reliance, but it is still a new age. While it was, let's say, Netflix, which was in existence for last 20 years, but they were for the very first time entering into India, and I'm disrupting the cable TV or your satellite, I mean, TV ecosystem, and also where we don't have any laws. So I think it's more about your I mean personal approach which you take, than the reading of law as such. Once you tune yourself to embrace these challenges or uncertainty, you feel happy about it. You think that, okay, I mean this is what I have to do, and I mean this is what I have signed up for. I think all things will start, I mean, falling in place. So I'll start with that, and happy to hear from others. I think for me it's more like uh, uh, change your personality, change your outlook, change your thought process, build the ecosystem, everything will fall in place then.
Yeah. I think even Gaurav's and Arjun's outlook would be really interesting, because in fintech space, people say that one RBI circular can kill your business model. So being in such industries, Gaurav, would you want to go first? Like, how do you ensure that everything is falling into place?
That's true, right? Like, uh, there is a large part of the fintech space has been unregulated, right? And to be fair, that is kudos to the RBI for allowing it to grow to where it has grown today. If this had happened, if this sort of upspring had happened even 10 years ago, typically the regulator would have come out with one small press release saying that all of this is illegal, please stop this immediately. But you know, the RBI has been far more mature about it. With this sort of uptake, and it's difficult. As Ashish said, a lot of it is about mindset, right? Just because something is not prohibited, that doesn't mean that it will not tingle your spidey senses as a lawyer or as the gatekeeper of all things right in your organization. So a lot of the no's that at least I push for internally are based on, this is going to become a problem in 3 to 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. So you don't want to build a product around a space which is unregulated, knowing fully well that, historically, this is how a regulator has looked at it, and they are going to frown upon it. So, that will ensure that there is some continuity on a product and business perspective as well. At the end of the day, as a support function, uh, legal is responsible in some way for continued growth. And, it's our job, or at least I'd like to believe that it's part of my job, to ensure that even if something was to come, from complete left field, and we've seen that, this year, like for me, for example, digital lending guidelines was a complete overhaul in terms of how the RBI looks at this space. But was it a surprise? No, because, discussion papers, working group recommendations have been available in the last 18 months. So you start taking those baby steps within your organizations to set up a process and a roadmap that once this law does come into fruition, how are we going to comply with it? So, while you're right that, there is a very strong history of the RBI changing stances overnight, a lot of it is, if you learn to look through what their approach has been historically, it will give you some ability to predict the future. Now, the challenge as a lawyer here will be that, more often than not, business will come to you and say, this is not illegal today, or this is not even frowned upon today. Why are you insisting that we follow it from now? And the answer to that is simple, right? Do you want to have a customer's journey change overnight, or do you want to build a system from the ground up where you know that, this is going to pan out in a certain way? So let's, program for that today itself. So at least that's how I like to sort of approach it. It's not, and I don't mean to sort of insinuate that it is the best way to go about it, because you do lose business, right? Because you will have scenarios where business will come to you and see, our competitors are doing this, they've managed to grow 5x. You are not allowing us to do this. What am I supposed to do? And, it's the lowest hanging fruit for anyone to blame, either finance or legal. But you have to sort of assess what sort of organization you want to build. And as long as you have a seat on that table where you are part of that strategic decision-making process, a lot of it becomes much easier.
Got it. Got it. And Arjun, what about you? Like, what all things do you keep in mind to ensure everything is running smoothly?
I think both Gaurav and Ashish did bring up excellent points, covering the, how you need to go into regulatory intent, right? When things are not in black and white at the end of the day. So I think my mantra, especially when joining any new organization, would be to basically start with understanding the product, and by understanding all the contours of your product, you would be able to, as a lawyer, I'm sure it'll take you no time to figure out what the regulatory landscape around that product is like, so that's the first step. And from there, the next steps would involve obviously taking stock of the regulatory landscape, doing things like risk impact analysis, right? I mean, you could be coming in at a time when, the product itself could be built around regulatory arbitrages, sometimes you might have to go with it. Sometimes you would have to come in and say no, right? So it all depends on the scenario, but these are some, fundamental steps you might need to take when especially when it's a sector where there's a lot of uncertainty, so and also it goes without saying, especially startups. I mean, startups typically are quite synonymous with handling tech, right? And like Ashish said, the law follows innovation typically, right? And yeah, that's right. I mean, in fact, RBI has given a long rope in some cases, and RBI happens to be our regulator, for both Gaurav and I. I'll be speaking a lot from an RBI perspective by de facto, so in some cases, RBI gives a very long rope, and in some cases, they are extremely strict about what they are expecting, So a couple of things that I have really noted, I mean, especially when you're trying to understand regulatory intent based on precedents, right? I mean, you need to understand what really irks them, right? I mean, a couple of things that I feel that really irks the RBI is when you violate, these three, I would say, kind of like the most, what RBI holds with most sanctity is three laws, in my opinion. One is KYC, the other is FEMA, and the third is when it comes to, customer centricity as well, So if you, if you like to stomp on a customer's foot, or you're not cognizant of how you're treating your customers, right? I mean, that's a real problematic thing as well, So whenever there's a product, the rollout, and some angle of the product either comes in the way. I mean, I forgot to mention AML obviously as well. KYC, FEMA, and AML. I mean, goes without saying. So if any of these three are likely to be touched upon, and we are on the, we're kind of sitting on the fence when it comes to this, I would definitely advise business from a very conservative position. But when it comes to other things, I mean, we have a longer rope to work with as well. So it all depends on the risk impact for that particular aspect of the product, and you shouldn't be the red flag lawyer as well at the end of the day, right? I mean, you have a lot of lawyers coming in and saying no, right? I mean, that's not the point. You need to be the business lawyer for the company as well at the end of the day. You can't, I mean, at the end of the day, the business is also not a business of law. There's already a core business which might be tech, it can be e-commerce, it can be tech, but we're not in a law firm, right? So we need to appreciate that and kind of work around that as well, I feel.
Correct, correct. No, this is a very nice point that you pointed out. Now suddenly, like, unlike the previous times where the legal teams used to work in silos, now suddenly they've started getting more involved in the business side because of the change in approach, the way they have become more like a facilitator to the business rather than just saying no to everything. So, like, how do you collaborate and communicate with other functions such as product, engineering, sales, and on legal issues and otherwise? Arjun, you want to go first on this?
Sure. So I think maybe I could speak from experience. When I came into my company, I was the first legal counsel here, and obviously there was product teams, there were tech teams, the engineering teams, all working on the creative side of the product building. And then there's this legal guy who comes in, and I actually played a very silent game. I spent my first few months trying to figure out the product, and whenever contract requests used to come to me, or some regulatory applications or something of the like used to come to me, I used to take the opportunity to understand the product, and kind of put across questions to my product team to understand it further as well. It was a good opportunity to pick up on the finer nuances of the product, right? Especially when a review request comes into legal. So I took that opportunity to kind of bounce ideas with my product team, give them some perspectives. I mean, trying to be as non-legal as possible, trying to get into the business or product side of things. So in most cases, I mean, I noticed that my business or product teams also reciprocally, wanted to get into the business side, I mean, the legal side of things as well, So I mean, that's where we started off, and eventually it became kind of like a reciprocal arrangement between the legal teams and the business teams and the product teams, and it kind of came naturally as well, to the point that these days certain business teams, or rather certain people in our teams from the business side, they in fact come to me and tell me, Arjun, there's a comma in between, so this should be interpreted differently, so changed, so well,
I would say that's a big win if non-legal people are understanding all these nuances. Gaurav, how do you handle this thing?
I wish I had spoken to Arjun before I joined my current organization, and I'll tell you why. So I was always an outsider looking. Right? I was always in private practice, and CredAble was my first in-house role. So when I came in here, and again, I was the first legal hire that they had. And organizationally, we were very clear, and CredAble continues to be very clear that they'll always pick the vertical head first, and then give you the flexibility to build around that, depending on how you want to do it. Now, me being me, and this was sort of a younger, more brazen me. The first agreement that I got was my employment agreement. Right? Day one, you're given it, and you're told sign it. I said, I'm not signing this. So uproar in the organization, right? Head of HR goes to the founder, your legal head is now said he's not signing this agreement. So I made a new draft, give it to them the next day. I said, I will sign your older agreement just to show my bona fides. But from an organization perspective, this is what our employment agreement should start looking like. We had ridiculous positions, right? Like we had non-compete provisions, we had, a ridiculously long notice period. And I didn't realize that a lot of it is a soft skill. That took me a couple of weeks to figure out, right? That eventually, if you're going to be, as Arjun mentioned, right, a red flag lawyer, and you're just going to say no, people are going to stop coming to you.
Correct.
So that's when I learned the hard way what Arjun did, right? Where I would just, for a quarter, I did nothing. I just shut up and I said, okay, let me understand how we do what we do. So I did full deep dives, right? From, the funnel of the sales to post sales, from development of a product to it being sort of deployed, where is it being deployed, how is it being deployed. And at the back end, what I would do is I would start working on new templates. So at the end of Q2, which was when my founders first sat to me and said that, look, first couple of months you did this. What have you been doing for the last 3 months? We've heard nothing from you. We've done nothing. I said, okay, this is what I've done. These are now 34 new templates that we have for every aspect of our business. This is why I want to do this. This is why I want to do that. And that's when they started appreciating that as long as they perceive that you understand the business, they will be far more open with you with what they're actually doing. Because your biggest threat, or at least the way I see it, any legal department's biggest threat is you are not given complete information. And if you're working with incomplete information and you are the gatekeeper of the document, there is going to be a slip between the cup and the lip. And that's what's going to come and burn your lap later. So as long as you're building that trust within the organization that, look, my job is not to say no. My job is to make sure that this happens, but it happens in a sustainable way without jeopardizing the company's primary interests. And as long as that messaging sort of trickles down through the sort of sales teams, right? And they're salespeople. Right? Their job is not to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. That's what the 20 other support functions in the organization for. You want them to be able to use their time with what they do best, which is go out and garner new business. Similarly with product, you don't want to bog them down and say that, hey, for this product, you need to do A, B, C, D compliances. So now we've developed these soft playbooks that if you're doing this sort of a product, these are the 5 things that you need to sort of keep in mind. If you're deploying tech or if you're sharing information, these are the things that you need to keep in mind. So they are not surprised when I bring up these points when we're negotiating contracts, because I'm like, guys, this is something that's been communicated over the last year or so. Why are we now sort of looking to ignore it? So as long as there's that fluidity in conversation between business and legal, I don't see how legal will be a challenge to this. But if there is a breakdown in that, then to my mind, it's game over. And for me, it was worse because I started at ground zero. I started with a game over construct because I said, no, I'm going to change everything. You guys don't know anything. You all have managed to function without a lawyer for so long. Obviously, you all have done it wrong.
Right.
So it took me a while to understand how to handle this with kid gloves. And now I think I've got a better grasp of it. But as I said, I wish I had spoken to Arjun before I had joined. I would have saved 1/4 of sleepless nights when I did join CredAble.
Ashish, how has your journey like collaborating with other functions? And I'm sure you have also worked with companies just starting from ground zero. So how has your experience been?
Yeah, so I'll actually talk about 2 things, broad framework, and it's more coming from when one day you will reach a CXO position in the legal sphere. So I think first is that when you are evaluating a particular opportunity, right, then I think you have to look at where you fit into the ecosystem. And I think somebody in India should do a study of all the successful company versus initially successful company, but eventually failed company or about to be failed company. I don't want to name, we all read in the newspapers, right? I think it would be clear that there would be a pattern of organizational structure at the top level, including where some key support function fits in, whether it is the CFO function, whether this is the GC or the CLO function, whether this is the internal audit kind of function, right? So you will get the data points that those who are successful and continue to be huge successful companies, how these functions are being placed. And as compared to those companies who were initially success, they failed or about to be failed, you have to pick your battle there. Sometime few people are in dire need of job, right? Either they want to change from some toxic environment to a new environment, a lower paying environment to higher paying, change in spectrum. You may have to make some compromise. So I think first thing which you as an individual is that where do you sit? Who do, although reporting is a bad word, but who are you accountable to? Who is the one where you would see more conflict, right? Very important, maybe at a later stage, whenever you cross, let's say 15, 16, 20 years of your career. The other part, which I would say, is that in terms of internal alignment, and I can speak of, let's say, we have now people here who comes with varied level of okay experience, but when you reach to a scale in uh, the career, first okay person you have to align with is the founder, right? Is that unless you and the founder or the CEO or the chief investor are aligned, are talking okay in the same frequency, you will never be able to be their best friend, right? And how to do it is that, look, one is that, again, you have to change your mental model, right? I always assume that my founders, my board of directors, investors are smarter than me, right? I am the dumbest one in the room. And I have seen this is not present in many lawyers, including plenty of people whom I have worked either as my bosses, my peers, or my juniors across various organizations. They believe that they are superhuman, they are rock stars. अगर जो वो बोले, अगर business उनकी बात नहीं मानता तो business वाले पागल है. That's a very regressive mindset. Uh, it's their business. They know their business very, very well. They know the law that applies to okay their business maybe equally at par with you, and you are not their only lawyer who they listen to, right? They also have their friends and family, their acquaintances, and they keep on. If you give advice to them, 9 out of 10 times they will bounce off your advice to somebody who maybe their drinking friend, their club friend, their golf friend, not, right? So assume that you are a context provider, right? And assume that maybe more than 50% of your advices may not be implemented. It's okay. It's not your business. I mean, it's their business. Matlab, if you want to be a rock star, might as well quit your job and be like Mike Legal, like start your own business, be entrepreneur, and do whatever you want to do, right? So align with them, right? And how to align with them, right? Look, whenever you're working with a startup in disruptive technology, I would still say that maybe Arjun and Gaurav, you are still into the business where RBI has some stability, understanding. You don't know what kind of anxiety level, not us, but RBI has when they talk about cryptos, right? I think they know that they can get shut down at any point of time. These founders, these directors, they know that they can be arrested at any point of time, right? They are not scared of that, right? So don't assume that, oh, I mean, I have to. They know tomorrow they will shut down. Their investor know that tomorrow their investment can go from $1 billion to a zero. They know that their asset, their personal assets, their jewelry, their car, their houses can be freezed. They know they can be arrested. They know their wife can be arrested, right? So they know this, right? We don't need to teach them, right? What we have to tell them that, look, if shit hits the fan, how well are you equipped? Don't ever say, oh, with me, your business can never be shut down. When I come to you as a GC, you can never be arrested. Don't think that they're fool people. And if you try to set the expectation, you will look like a fool, right? So align with them. Say, yes, things can happen, but how are you prepared to manage those things? Have you anticipated worst case scenarios, right? So first anticipate worst case scenarios. Okay, then say, okay, that's the worst which okay we can see. Now how do we handle that? What ecosystem we need? The other mistake which lawyers like us do, right? Those who are in house, they think that, oh, they don't need any help. They are like Spider-Man, or they are like Superman. They can solve everything, right? No, you cannot solve everything. You can't even solve 10% of the problem. Your role, and I'm talking about when you reach a CXO level, is to identify the right people, both internally and externally. Build the right team with you, right? Build the right consultants with you, right? Make sure that your ability is to ask the right question. You are not supposed to provide the answer each and every time, but are you asking the right question to your consultant? Are you asking the right question to the team which you are building when you're interviewing them, right? That's what a legal okay leader is for. And the last thing is that never ever approach any regulator by saying whether it is gaming company, crypto company, any, I mean, I'm talking about when I started my career as in-house lawyer, when ATM technologies were being introduced in India way back in 2001, right? There, the same FOMO that or FUD we have for crypto at that point of time, the same thing we had for the ATM technologies, right? Or e-commerce technology. Never go and say, oh, don't regulate us, we will change the world, we will change India, don't put any tax on us, don't put a regulation. No, if you say that, next day, okay, they will put 28% GST or 50% GST or whatever it is, they will block you and all. Go with an open mind, okay, that say, I understand that I am disrupting the industry with this technology. I understand this disruption is going to cause these issues to the government. Okay. I understand that these issues will be caused to the old industry. These issues will be caused to the customer. This is how government might potentially lose some tax revenue. Here is my proposal to come to a win-win situation. I am willing to take pains. I am willing to invest as a cost of compliance. I am willing to take a hit in the speed of business. Go with this approach, 9 out of 10 times your industry will not get shut. The problem is that, you know the in-house lawyers, consultants, mostly consultants, right? You have to be very careful in picking the consultants, right? Very, very careful, right? Very careful. They'll say, अरे हो जाएगा, हाँ हाँ, अरे हम तो, आप देखो, आप हमको एंगेज करो, हम ऐसा पेपर बनाएंगे, टैक्स क्या, गवर्नमेंट तो आपको अपने जेब से पैसा देगी आपको. Okay, they go and just then they say, oh, don't regulate, this is so much employment, we do this and that, gaming, crypto. No, government is smarter than you. Government is a lot smarter than you, right? Understand their pain point, appreciate the pain point, embrace that, have an open dialogue. So this is how I think you as a leader build the ecosystem, make the ecosystem mature, understand them. Don't think you are a superstar. You are there to play a small role. Make sure that your small role is very effective. This is how I have approached. I mean, I can give examples, uh, plenty of those. In case we have time, okay, towards later part of this talk, happy to share live example. It's not this gyan I am throwing, but yeah, this is how you have to be a sutradhar. You have to just behave like a sutradhar to really bring everything together and take the right approach to help industry grow.
No, I think that's a really good insight as to like hiring right people is extremely critical because
I'm
one
not
wrong
thinking that
hire.
you're a rock star. It starts by first he or in-house counsel thinking that he is one, it is not his business.
Right.
Thinking that his CEOs, other people, investors are smarter than him.
Correct.
Thinking that government is smarter than him, right? Or her, right? Once
Right.
you have that mindset, then you would be able to take the next step. If you
Right.
don't have the mindset, say, yeah, Joe, main hu, I am the last word, then I'm sorry. I mean, you are not only harming your own career, you're also harming the company. You are destroying the wealth of your founder. You are putting jobs of other 10,000 employees at risk.
Correct. Correct. No, this is very, very valid, and I can relate to it at some level. And this, like, a lot of, like, while listening to you, a lot of conversation was happening around ensuring that everything is in order with respect to how things are there internally, like, like Gaurav mentioned, ensuring in his example, like when he mentioned the contracts, the employment contracts, like that were there, he said that there has to be some changes. And like Arjun mentioned, he had to be very careful as to understanding how things are there. So one thing, and I think this is again something to do with a lot of controversy that is happening around these days, that there are a lot of instances that we have heard now where mismanagement, unethical practices are just being sold in the news about a lot of businesses. So right now, as general counsels who are in center of things, like, how do you ensure that you're able to create a culture of compliance, ethics right from the day one? Because this is something that you cannot change it at random. It has to be done from ground zero. So Gaurav, I would like, if you want to go first, would want to hear from you.
So I think, see, Tushar, that's it's a very simple one. And I think Ashish touched on this as well. It has to be a top-down approach.
Right.
Lying
No,
with
Yeah, that I completely agree. Unless and until management is not aligned that this is how we have to do. Yes.
Yeah. So as long as they are conscious of the value that you are providing, that you're not just there to say no to everything. And there is a reason why you want to amend things in a certain way. And I'll give you sort of 2 or 3 examples. Right? One on the regulatory side. Right? Tech in India is probably the most over-regulated space, despite it being regulated in the simplest way. Currently, the law around any form of tech or any consent or any sort of user data is consent-based. पूछ के जो करना है करो is the government's view. Then they matured a bit, said, "Acha, theek hai, but make sure that that data resides in India." Data localization came about. Then they developed this sort of phrase of informed consent. Now, whatever that means, because there's no guidance around it, there's no judgment law. It's just an industry interpretation of what everyone believes is informed consent. Similarly, a lot of work, and again, I can only speak from my experience, a lot of work we do is with other banks and financial institutions. Now, they have a very sort of archaic approach when it comes to their contracts, that regardless of what service you are providing, this is my default contract. I will not negotiate it. I will not change it. Either you sign it or I'm not going to give you this business. Now, that creates a number of sort of problems. It's a space which is over-regulated but under-enforced. So while people may think that there are 10,000 laws, no one's going to enforce it, so let's not care about it. Now that thought trickles into contractual compliance as well, where you have, "Arey, abhi sign kar dete hain, let's see what happens, as the relationship grows." Now, unfortunately, I have not been able to wrap my head around this, right? Where I'm like, okay, there are known risks. How can we prevent those known risks from becoming something which is a showstopper? We've moved beyond the era of 500 rupee fines, right? That changed in 2013. We are now in a world where fines are based on the turnover of the company. That's a scary number. And it helps people like us who are in this profession, because now we've been given crutches, where instead of saying ki, you don't comply with this law, either you go to jail or you pay a 500 rupee fine. No one's going to comply with that. You don't comply with this contract, no one's going to care. Now, when people are looking at sort of both their contracts and statutory compliance, right, they are far more conscious of it. And that's been a development that I believe has happened over time, where, initially you had people sharing any form of data without any form of contractual protection. Now, even, first year tech, people who are joining, when I was doing their induction, they were like, "Yeah, but don't we have to sign a confidentiality agreement before we share data?" I wanted to cry. I was like, those are tears of joy that there is a 19-year-old who has just come out of college, who is mature enough to now realize that if I'm sharing something with you, there needs to be some form of umbrella cover around it. It's beautiful, right? So people are becoming increasingly aware of what non-compliances can lead to, both on the contractual side and the statutory side. And as long as you have a dictum from management that, and look, for all of us, we are investor-held entities, right? So governance cannot suffer, especially in today's climate, where, minor slip-ups are subject to sort of increased levels of internal controls and audits and so on and so forth. And that's a good change. We had 2 years where the entire sort of tech and digital India ecosystem was moving at a breakneck speed. That correction in terms of slowing down, assessing where we are is important. And that's the junction that we are at today. Now, again, here, one of two things can happen. Either we're going to regulate, effectively and efficiently, where, we've seen scenarios like the entire insurance industry till date is governed by a self-regulating organization. And it's worked out fairly well for them so far. I mean, touch wood, and I don't mean to imply that. So there is a way in which you can have, self-schooling in these things. And an increasing part of that is the awareness that is generally being created around compliance. And as long as that happens, coupled with a dictum from, vertical heads that look, we have to do this, let's try and find a solution around it. And that's where your skill or where your craftsmanship as the lawyer comes in, right? That you need to now, instead of saying this is a problem, stop, you have to be solution oriented and say that, look, instead of doing it this way, if we do it this way, these are the 4 risks that get mitigated. And more often than not, you will have people who will listen to that. So that's all sort of I have to say on this subject.
No, this is a valid point, and this brings me to this. This is documentary I was seeing about the Spotify, like how it came into the picture, and there, in fact, like in the documentary, it was mentioned was their general counsel who went out and say that you need to, like, she basically guided that this is how you should be charging the premium, because the tech person and the founder, they were against. They were saying that you cannot hire, like you cannot be asking money from users to enjoy music, and that is why all the music labels were against Spotify at that time. But the moment she said that make it free but create certain features on top of it which will be charged so that you are able to pay back to the artist, and now Spotify is one of the I think I was reading it somewhere, but Spotify disburses the most amount of money to artists today. So a lot of times, if you're providing a way rather than just saying no, it definitely helps.
Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, has this thumb rule, right? And he's written about it in his autobiography, that lawyers are inherently your best negotiators. So if you want a deal team, even today, I think Netflix India, and Ashish, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Netflix doesn't call their legal team legal. They call them BALA, business and legal affairs, where you as legal are responsible. You are the gatekeeper of the entire project because everything funnels into the contract that you are holding the pen for. So that's, to my mind, such a mature way of thinking.
That's a really good insight. Ashish, you want to add something to it?
No, I'll just basically pick the topic where I think you started to talk about governance, fraud, and all, right? So I just have 2 cents to it, right? I think, look, you cannot judge morality of the people immediately, right? So I think all these things get surfaced. No venture capital firm, VC firm would like to invest in anybody when on the face of it they believe that this founder could turn out to be corrupt person or fraud person. And even if the founder is bona fide, he or she may end up hiring certain people at critical position who may not be clean people, and they will never come to know when they're interviewing. No founder would want to hire somebody who would kill the company. All these things get surfaced. You cannot see intentions on day one. Intentions are not told, they are revealed. Okay. So you should be prepared for that, right? Now, I think 2 or 3 things which you have to ensure. First, you have to make sure that you are prepared not to succumb or not to be a collateral damage. At times, you get requests from board founders, investor, that you step into as a board of director of a particular subsidiary of a company, main company, take some business role. You need to plan for your own safeguard, right? So that's very important. Second, as a GC of the company or CLO or whatever, right, you don't owe the duty only to the board or to CEO. You owe the duty even to the janitor of the company, right? If, let's say, somebody is being hired as a professional to lead a particular business which you are creating, an SPV or a separate subsidiary, that professional may be requested by the founder or the board that why don't you join the board, because there's some requirement under SEBI law or RBI, principal officer on the board, designated, director, minimum 2 director. How are you ensuring that while they are doing the good part, but if somebody is effing up with the company, they are saved? So assume that these things may happen. This is one of the unfortunate human behavior. So how can you plan to first safeguard yourself? Like in flight, when the flight is like crashing down, you will first put face mask on you, and then you will put the face masks mask on the uh, okay. So help yourself, help the ecosystem. I don't think a GC can really correct the culture as such, right? You could build various tools. Somebody is corrupt, right? I mean, you just can't really help it. Going back to my first point is that when you're entering the company, okay, just see that where your role is, right? How the ecosystem of the company is being designed. Without naming a particular company, let's take the example. Okay, CEO or the founder is currently holding less than 10% stake of the company, has been in the company, has formed the company for about 5-6 years, right? Company has turned multi-unicorn, has enough cash in the bank account, and but he or she hold, let's say, 6% or maybe 7%. The company has gone into series F and G and all, right? You are being interviewed. They say, hey GC, you will be reporting into the CFO. Okay, then you will talk to CFO, HR. You will say that okay, the internal control function is also reporting to the CFO. The admin is also reporting to the CFO, right? Now you're only keeping your fingers crossed that your CFO is holier than thou, right? If that particular person is vulnerable, okay, gone, the whole company is gone, right? So, and I'm not saying CFO people as such, I'm just saying that just see that who has the whole control. Now if you want to take some action against your boss, and your boss, I mean, you could either be reporting to the CEO or to HR head or to whoever, right? I mean, you can't whistleblow, or you can't escalate things. So very important to know that where you are going, where are the touch points, who are the gatekeepers of these frauds and crimes and all, and how are they being independent or not so independent. Hardline reporting, very important. Last but not the least, look, our whole ecosystem has to improve from an enforcement standpoint. You pick up the ecosystem, just go back 10 years or 15 years. Look at how many startups have gone bust, and not because there was a product market failure, right? Bust because of so-called questionable activities. In fact, recently many founders have openly admitted on social media that there were um, issues in terms of governance. We know that how many auditors have stepped down. We know how many independent directors have stepped down. You tell me how many of these companies are being investigated by SFIO. You tell me how many founders, directors, people who are in the key position have been arrested and kept behind the bars at least for 90 days. Okay. No, nothing. So the ecosystem is supporting it, right? So you take strict action, right? You take strictest action, make it public, make it open, set examples, put fear of God, put fear of Tihar jail, put fear of third degree of police, put fear of name and shame, okay, before the whole world. Then only, okay, whatever you make the law, people will comply. Otherwise, you can make best of the laws of the world, but founders being openly admitting governance failure on Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, but no action is being taken. I think that I mean, this ecosystem is fueling odd activities than stopping the odd activities.
Right. No, no. I mean, implementation of the law is the biggest challenge, irrespective how good the laws are, how well informed they are. That is rightly put. Arjun, you also want to add something to this?
Sure, sure. So I think I would again go back to having a good pulse on your company and what stage your company is in, and what kind of growth trajectory that you have ahead. Because there's no one size fit all as well, right? And you can't just come in and break things as well, right? So there might be a culture that's set, and if you've just recently joined the company, I think basically understanding these contours is first important, and then try to figure out what the right time for the process is. I mean, here we are speaking about processes for compliance and ethics, right? So if ever you see a milestone of growth ahead where the teams are scaling or the product is growing and the product is touching areas which are highly sensitive and requires a lot of compliance and ethical execution, I feel it is very important that the processes are kind of set before that milestone is achieved. So you need some kind of foresight for that primarily, because if that process is kind of set before the milestone, you have time to kind of test it and kind of prepare yourself for the milestone as well, and you have a team that's also learning with you through those weeks or months towards that milestone, right? I mean, so in a nutshell, basically set processes before you scale. It's a lot easier and it makes your scaling also a lot easier, So it can be something as simple. I mean, Gaurav pointed out, right? I mean, just simple as setting a process of having an NDA, right? I mean, whenever anybody from your business talks to an external person, I mean, ideally you should start with setting a process of NDA. And if you're the first legal guy in the company, everybody will be up in arms asking why should we do it, So that one thing leads to the other. You might have a session, you tell them how and why an NDA is important. See, I mean, it's as simple as this, you start a collaboration, you might share APIs with each other, try to integrate, and then later realize, it's not working out. But there could have been a lot of trading of confidential information between two companies as well, right? So it's something they would understand, and I would say, again, I mean, it depends on the scale of the company, so start small and based on your assessment of the company, bring in the processes slightly before that milestone is achieved. A slightly more advanced process that I learned from working in a larger organization is basically having other processes like a deviation matrix, right? A deviation matrix is very important, especially for larger organizations. I mean, when you look at the startup space, I mean, there are a few startups who definitely need that kind of thing, especially when you're working in a systematic kind of market as well, right? Financial services, for example. So if there's any deviation from your standard document, which you have set, there needs to be an approval matrix, somebody, it's not just legal who needs to come in and take that risk. Business should appreciate the risk. Legal should convey the rationale behind why it's okay to take the risk, and business should approve it. Something along these lines should be there, such that if you're taking a very serious or a risky decision, all stakeholders are on the same page at the end of the day. And most importantly, tomorrow, if somebody else comes in, there's a beautiful audit trail as well. You know exactly why you took that decision on that day. It might not be you, it might have been your predecessor, for that matter. So there's a time and place for everything, and processes can kind of vary depending on the scale you're at, And another very helpful thing that I've noticed along the years is, calendarizing and tracking events, So, I mean, at the fundamental level, you could start by calendarizing your MCA filings, right? From your financial statements to your annual returns, all of this. I mean, some places you might not call this legal work, you might call it compliance work, but nonetheless, legal could come in. I mean, at the end of the day, you interpret the law. So it's not a big deal, really. So if you can roll out a calendar for your finance team for MCA related matters, and likewise, if you can roll out a calendar for your HR team for labor law related matters, it ensures that everybody kind of inherently becomes systematic with your workflow as well, and you have reminders popping in to tell you that, so and so milestone is up, let's all work together, figure this out, So these calendarization of things can also be helpful even for, I mean, I'm referring to periodic milestones here, right? I mean, there could be other events also, sometimes you might be working on a regulatory application, so you might not be ready to do things today, you might have to do that later. So setting a calendar is very helpful, I think, even to bring teams together at the end of the day, So that's another thing. And lastly, I think creating an environment, I mean, this is more of a soft skill thing as well. I think in my company, I've been very fortunate to have excellent people and culture team, so we often have a lot of training programs where people are, or rather, sessions where we can speak and provide an environment where we can speak up, and typically they are themed around let's say theater workshops or things like that, where there is a subtle what do you say, subliminal message that is attached to it, but you realize that over the workshop as well, you might be doing, it might be a role play based thing, but eventually the bottom line is a kind of a learning in the form of a compliance or a ethical matter is also being conveyed to you in the process, so in the process, through these programs, it is important that you develop an environment where employees can speak up and speak up freely as well, because at the end of the day, if you give them the space to if they have integrity, then their commitment to the organization will also be a lot. I mean, it's invaluable, I would say, and for that matter, that commitment is also, it also becomes kind of like a it is accompanied by righteousness as well in a way, so that's very important to kind of slowly and gradually build that. And I think the last aspect is something I learned from the company I'm working at more than anything else, so yeah.
No, this is really helpful. Now, even though I wanted to ask a lot more questions, but I think we are nearing the time and I won't keep you for long. So I'll just open the floor for the audience that in case they have any question, we'll just pick, a couple of them in case there is any before closing the webinar so that we stay on time. Anyone in the audience, if you have any questions, anything you want to ask, from us speakers, please feel free to put it in the chat. I think there are no questions. Great. So it seems that there are no questions from anyone. So just a second.
By the way, Tushar, that show you mentioned about Spotify, it's called The Playlist. It is a really good. Yeah.
It was really interesting, really gripping. And I really like the way they have put in, like they started with one person's point of view, then went to the other person's point of view. It was really, really great.
Yeah, especially when the lawyer came in, it was like all goosebumps.
We were able to relate with so much, like she was on a way to become a partner, and the way she was interacting with everyone in the team and understanding the basic things that they should be looking at, which they were not understanding, which is pretty relatable.
Yeah.
So there is one question that has come in. Miss Anita is asking that, sir, how to handle a situation where the business team is pushing things to just enter the transaction, even at the cost of accepting some non-negotiable terms. I think this is something that we all would have been pushed for. So anyone wants to pick this up? Arjun, you want to go first?
Yeah, why not? Why not? So maybe I can tell you how things are for me today. I mean, today my business people tell me that if Arjun says no, then we won't do it. So,
Tushar, I have to drop off. I have a call, but it was great to be here, and thank you
Sure.
for patient listening.
Thank you so much for your time. Yes, Arjun, you were saying.
Yeah, so I think if your business people have to tell you that, it depends on the kind of trust you build with them as well, right? I mean, it's a combination of your legal acumen as well as the interpersonal skills that also, I mean, interpersonal relationships that you build as well, So, like I said, I mean, risk assessment is one thing, but risk impact assessment is a different thing, So, when you see a risk, you should definitely look at what kind of impact it would have. I mean, if it's not going to cause an extinction event or something majorly, something that can affect your company majorly, you should look at it from a business point of view, see the other side of things and try to find a middle ground, because at the end of the day, I mean, like I said, I mean, we are working, if you're working in-house, you're not in the business of law. You're in the business of the company itself, so
Right.
you need to figure a way forward. And as long as the company is not under any existential kind of threat, I mean, figure your way out, give them options to mitigate that risk and move forward.
Right. No, correctly pointed out, because there are some times which is a no-go, like, it's going to end bad. So
Yeah.
then you have to be pragmatic and say, no, this cannot work. But sometimes you have to find a way out, evaluate from the business wise, whether this is making sense or not, and then accordingly evaluate things, how should be done. Very rightly put. Gaurav, you want to add something to this?
I think Arjun covered it fairly accurately. And I'll tell you, I'm on the other end of the spectrum, right? The counterparties that I'm most scared of are the people who, without changing anything, without negotiating anything, are okay to sign the agreement. To my mind, that means they have not read, which means that they have no idea what they're getting into. So if someone's taking the effort to read it and then is pushing back on certain items, I always welcome that, because those are the people who I know have a desire to be compliant. With the others, it's just a piece of paper for them, especially, look, on our lending side, when we do lend to sort of MSMEs, 80% of our contracts are not looked at, right? And I always make it a point to ask the RM to set up a call then with the customer saying that, we sent you a loan agreement. Have you at least read it? Is it in a language that you understand? He's like, but India mein no one negotiates a loan agreement. I said, okay, that's a different problem. But as long as you've read it and you're okay doing all of this, then I know that you're interested in complying, which to me is 80% of the battle won. Right. And look, there will always be scenarios where there will be things that you cannot accept. Now, the trade-off that you have to make at that time is the risk-reward ratio, that you have to find a way to quantify the risk. Either you slip in a sort of limitation of liability, you look at what is the real possibility of this becoming a cash out event for your organization versus what is the potential revenue that you will lose if you don't do this mandate. And if the answer to that is you will lose more if you don't pick this up, then there is no deal on the table. At least that's how I've sort of navigated this so far.
Right. No, correct. I think Mr. Rashid is also raising his hand. Mr. Rashid, you have any question you would want to ask? I think that could be an error. No issue. So I think this is pretty insightful. Thank you so much for taking time out from your, busy schedule. I know it's a long day and it's just, in between your meetings. So thank you once again, for taking time out, and thank you everyone for joining in for this session. Have a wonderful day ahead. Goodbye. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Arjun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, folks. Bye.